welcome to the latest episode of Mystery Ghost Stories. If you remember what I said last week, you might remember what I said about what tonight's episode is on. It's a very spooky case, in my opinion. Full disclosure, I don't know how much we'll get on hauntings and sightings, but there's plenty of history and backstory to make us believe and think that it's highly possible that there is hauntings. I just don't know how many we'll get on the sites that I'm going to look up. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Mystery Ghost Stories, the haunting, the ghost, the ghost of Grace Brown. This might sound familiar to some people, it might be new to others. Does a century-old murder victim haunt a resort in upstate New York? For generations, the Adirondack Mountains in upstate New York have been a vacation spot for the famous and the infamous. One summer night in 1988, several employees of the Covewood Lodge in Big Moose Lake, including Rhonda Busala, were approaching the staff lodge. Rhonda led the pack, unaware that someone or something might be waiting inside. I walked inside the staff lodge, straight up the stairs with my hand out, reaching for the string, which is how to turn on the light. As I approached the top of the stairs, and just before I was ready to turn on the light, a feeling came over me that somebody was right there, more or less. I stopped in my tracks and really just didn't move. I didn't have an overwhelming feeling of fright, but something definitely or someone was there. It just kind of took my breath away. But the real show was outside. According to Rhonda, her friends were witnessing a spine-tingling vision. All three of them had the same exact story. It lingered for just a few seconds and then moved away. All three of them saw the ghost. I didn't see anything myself, but I felt that somebody was right there, and it was just a strange feeling. But who was haunting Big Moose Lake? People there. Jesus, I can't. I talk so fast. I get so far ahead of myself. Sorry, Justin. People there believe it is the ghost of the young and beautiful Grace Brown. In 1906, a brutal murder shocked the nation. Decades later, Hollywood turned it into the notorious case into a hit film, A Place in the Sun. Hollywood portrayed Grace as an unattractive man, but in truth, Grace Brown was a naive, loving 19-year-old who worked at the Gillette skirt factory in Portland. It was there in 1905 that she met the handsome and charming Chester Gillette, the factory owner's nephew. Full disclosure, I'm on the Unsolved website, Unsolved Mysteries, and this is pretty much just like a transcript of the episode, because this is exactly what Robert Stack says. I'm half tempted to read it as Robert Stack, but it might get a little dull after a while, so there might be times where I kind of go in and out of Robert Stack's voice, so let's at least have a little fun with it that way. Chester Gillette was considered quite a catch by people in town because he was popular, and he was athletic, and he was handsome. I'm sure a lot of women in Portland were interested in him. From the start, it was a scandalous romance. According to Craig Brandon, Chester convinced Grace to see him without a chaperone, which in those days put her reputation at risk. That's how things were back in the early 1900s, apparently. I want to see you without a chaperone. For Chester, it was a secret affair. He never took Grace out in public. He never acknowledged their relationship. According to Craig Brandon, Chester was frequently seen with other women, especially those from the town's wealthier families. Her friends were warning her that he wasn't what he seemed to be, that he was something different, and I think that she had no experience with that type of person. And so she was seeing what she wanted to see, rather than seeing what her friends were telling her. So, I've seen this episode of Unsolved Mysteries several times, hence the reason I'm doing an episode on it. And every time that I come across this part, I can see it. Like I can totally picture it. She's just completely smitten by this man. Like completely smitten by him. Meanwhile, she doesn't realize that he's a playboy. Just a total, out there, hitting on every other woman with a pulse and just not thinking anything of her. Which is kind of weird because if you see it, like there's only like one picture of her. She was a fairly attractive young woman. So it's like, why are you playing this young woman when like she's actually quite a catch? But Grace could not resist Chester, and soon she discovered she was pregnant. At the time, unwed mothers were outcasts. Grace begged Chester to marry her, but he stalled as long as he could. Finally, in July 1906, Chester took Grace to the Adirondacks. She assumed it was a wedding trip. According to Craig Brandon, they rented a rowboat at Big Moose Lake from a man named Robert Morrison. Morrison expected them to come back around dinner time, and when they didn't come back, he thought that something was suspicious. The next morning, Morrison organized a search party. The rowboat had capsized. A short distance from it, they found Grace's body. 2 days later, police found Chester Gillette in a nearby hotel. At first, he denied even knowing Grace Brown. Then he claimed Grace had drowned herself in despair because he didn't love her anymore. Few believed him. He was tried and convicted of first-degree murder on March 30th, 1908. Chester Gillette died in the electric chair. Had justice been served? Apparently not enough to satisfy the restless spirit of Grace Brown. So, one of the interesting things here is that he hung himself from the start. From the absolute start, he hung himself. Because he denied even knowing her. Like, dude, like, there are reports. Like, Robert Morrison saw you with her, and you took his boat to the Adirondacks. So, to sit there and say that you didn't know her is a huge red flag and damning on your part. And then that she drowned herself because he didn't love her anymore. I mean, did you? You probably didn't ever love her. She was just an object to you, buddy. But that's just, yeah. I was. Oh, Linda Lee Mackin had her own encounter with Grace Brown a few months after Rhonda Buselitz. I was walking down toward the lake with my flashlight, and the light was getting dimmer and dimmer. By the time I got to the edge of the lake and the rocks, my flashlight wasn't working, so I had to turn around and go back. I was awestruck, and not only was I certain that I was looking at a ghost, but I had a very strong feeling of sadness. She was very sad. Was it the ghost of Grace Brown? Over the years, there have been continuous sightings, and many wonder if her spirit has been trapped at Big Moose Lake since the day she was drowned by her faithless lover. 'So we have that. We also have another website. One of the most shocking and scandalous murders to ever take place in upstate New York happened right here in the Adirondacks. The murder of Grace Brown in July of 1906 has influenced a number of plays and songs, even a movie, and a novel as well, and she reportedly still haunts the lake today. So the movie that they're referring to is A Place in the Sun. Uh, I want to say Montgomery Clift plays Chester Gillette. Don't quote me on that. I can look it up. Elizabeth Taylor plays the woman that Chester Gillette cheats on Grace Brown with. And Grace Brown is played by Shelley Winters. Let's see if I have this right. (1951). Yes, Montgomery Clift played Chester Gillette. Elizabeth Taylor played Angela Vickers. And Shelley Winters played Alice Tripp, but technically it's Grace Brown. because Montgomery Clift played a guy named George Eastman. So obviously they couldn't use their real names, but that's what it's based off of. Okay, so it gets into the love story. Um, Pregnancy. Oh, we have a little bit more on the pregnancy here. So, in 1906, Brown revealed to Gillette that she was pregnant. She was 20, and he was 23. At the time, unwed mothers were outcast from society. Brown went back to her family's farm where she and Gillette corresponded by letters, in which she basically begged him to marry her. So, I get this because obviously she doesn't want to become an outcast, so she pretty much just, you know, at the time needed to like marry him, or otherwise people will look at her like, you know. But she's kind of begging, so it's I'm not I'm not condoning him murdering her by any means, but I'm sort of I get I guess what I'm saying is I sort of see why he would be kind of like he's not very reluctant. He doesn't want to, but that doesn't. I'm sure. Basically, what I'm saying is I'm sure that there was like a medium here, like a compromise, other than cold blooded murder. But apparently, he didn't have the time to stick around to find out what it was. Gillette finally wrote to her that he would take her away on a romantic outing to the Adirondacks in July. Legend has it that Brown either assumed he was going to propose to her on this trip, or she supposedly thought they would actually get married while they were away. He was vague enough to give her hopes up. The young couple spent their first night of the trip in Utica, then took the train to Tupper Lake on the second night. On July 11th, they took a train backward to Utica, stopping at Big Moose Lake along the way in Herkimer County. Gillette and Brown rented a canoe together and spent the afternoon on the lake. While Brown reportedly left her trunk at the train station, Gillette brought everything he took with him on the boat, including his suitcase, which had a tennis racket attached to it. Around early evening, Gillette smashed Brown's head with the tennis racket, and she fell into the water. Brown had previously told Gillette in a letter that she was unable to swim. Gillette fled the scene and spent the night at Arrowhead Hotel in Inlet on Ramilius. So not only did he deny knowing her, not only did he then say, "Oh, she drowned herself because I didn't love her anymore," but he went under an assumed name. He didn't try to cover his tracks at all. At all. Brown's body surfaced not too long afterwards, with the autopsy eventually revealing bruises on her head and a 4-month-old fetus inside her. Why couldn't you say a 4-month-old? Okay, because it was a fetus. Okay, that makes sense. Gillette was arrested within the days of the murder. Newspapers across upstate New York and beyond covered covered the event and subsequent trial, while Gillette maintained his innocence. What innocence, dude? You were guilty from the start. His trial at the courthouse in Herkimer was the most sensational ever held in the area, with hundreds coming to witness. Famous newsmen of the day like Bat Masterson came from New York City. The gunman Bat Masterson? How many Bat Mastersons were there? It's gotta be him. During the trial, the defense claimed Brown had jumped into the lake committing suicide. They pointed to letters Brown had written to Gillette mentioning that she wanted to die. They asserted that when Gillette stood up to her boat, the boat capsized. The DA insisted Gillette had hit her over the head with a tennis racket and did nothing to save her when she succumbed into the lake. On December 5th, 1906, after nearly 5 hours of deliberation, the judge found Gillette guilty of murder in the first degree, and he was sentenced to death by electric chair. He was reportedly calm and even smiling when his sentence was handed down. Maintained his innocence, right? But once they pretty much shot that to all hell, might as well smile on your way to the chair, right? Gillette was transferred from the Herkimer County Jail to the Auburn Prison, now Auburn Correctional Facility, where he was executed on March 30th, 1908. 2 years! Side note, this is going to be a little side note for you. It took them 2 years from trying him for first degree murder to kill him. There are people on death row, many people on death row, Scott Peterson being one of them, who have been on death row for over 30 years, and they're still not dead. So what's the point in saying that someone's going to be sentenced to die if they're just going to rot in prison for the rest of their life? Why not just give them the sentence of rotting in prison their whole life? Makes no sense these days. But back in the day, they had it figured out. Tried 1 year, dies two years later. That works for me. Gillette's body was moved from... as his last day on Earth was nearing closing, Gillette reportedly confessed to the murder of his spiritual advisors at the prison, who never revealed the exact details. Gillette's body was moved to nearby Soul Cemetery, where it was buried in an unmarked grave. According to celebrity grave enthusiasts, the plot had a had a road paved over it, and the exact location of the grave is now unknown. Wow. Talk about a big F you to that guy. Many continue to be fascinated by this incredible murder story. Sightings of the ghost of Grace Brown have been continually reported over the years around Big Moose Lake. The public is able to take advantage of hiking, camping, and boating opportunities at the lake, if you dare. So there's that. Again, I told you there's more history than the actual sightings. We're going to Reddit again, second week in a row. No. I hate when it signs me in. I hate that. Stop it. I don't want to sign in. Alright, there's nothing on Reddit. It's even an episode on Spotify. How about that? Alright, we're gonna look for sightings at this point. Unsolved mysteries. Yeah. Believe me, the day of that. Yeah, it's a whole lot of nothing. Trying to get at least one more. It is worth noting that in July, it will be 120 years to the date that Grace Brown was murdered. How about that? 120 years to the day. July 11th, 2026 will be 120 years to the day that Grace Brown was murdered. Kind of crazy when you think about it. Trial. Yeah, see, it tells you about the story, but it doesn't tell you about the... Alright, well, nevertheless, we don't have a lot to go on, but we have two sightings from two people that were on Unsolved Mysteries. And that was like maybe, I want to say that was about 20 plus years ago that they had these sightings. We know that she was murdered there. We know who her killer was. It was Chester Gillette. The better question, we have a few questions. I have a few questions that I will ask on behalf of all of us. Why is the ghost of Grace Brown still haunting Big Moose Lake? Is she not satisfied with the the outcome of Chester Gillette dying by electric chair, I mean, I'd be pretty satisfied. But I think it goes deeper than that. I think it goes much deeper than that. Yes, she got her. I would say yes, she got her. She got her justice when he was, killed in the electric chair. However, it might not be that simple for a spirit. You know what I mean? Like, she had her whole life in front of her. She's only 20 years old, so maybe her spirit was like, you know what? I think I'm gonna stick around for a while. I don't know how long a while is in the spirit world, but maybe she felt she had unfinished business. Maybe she wanted to stick around and take in the lake and take in just a little bit more of life because she didn't get to when she was alive. I know that might sound a little weird, but I mean, technically, I think she got justice when Chester Gillette was fried in the electric chair. So it wouldn't really, from that end, it wouldn't make sense as to why her spirit would stick around. So I think it's, she wanted to try to enjoy life in the afterlife. And Big Moose Lake is pretty beautiful, and maybe it's something much deeper than that. Do I think the ghost of Grace Brown still haunts? Well, let me put it this way. Next question is: do I think Grace Brown once haunted the Adirondacks and Big Moose Lake? Absolutely. If more than two people said they saw her, which they did, you got to believe it's true. Do I believe in 2026 is Grace Brown still haunting Big Moose Lake? Probably. Maybe she's confused. Maybe she's lost. And she doesn't know that it's okay for her to move on. Or maybe she just doesn't want to for her own reasons. And it's really sad. Again, this woman was 20 years old, pregnant, with her whole life in front of her. And this guy, who pretty much never really loved her from the start, murders her and deprives her and her child of life. And now she's just aimlessly roaming and haunting the last place where she was. I, for one, believe that Grace Brown has been seen as a ghost by several people. I absolutely believe that. Would I myself ever go to the Adirondacks and go to Big Moose Lake in hopes to see Grace Brown? Yeah, maybe. Not that I'm ever going to find myself in New York, but who knows? I think it would be interesting if I saw a spirit. I think that would be absolutely crazy. I would absolutely do another video on it, right? What do you think? What do you think of this story of Grace Brown, for one? And also, do you think she still haunts Big Moose Lake? You know the deal. You never do. But do let me know in the comments below. And if you're not already subscribed, be sure to hit the subscribe button so that you know anytime that I go live, which is usually every Friday at 7, like right now. I do occasionally go live for other videos. They're usually horror analysis videos. I haven't done one in a while, I'll be honest. Full disclosure. Do stick around for next Friday's video from Mystery Ghost Stories, where I will be looking into the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast, which is a couple towns over from me. So that should be interesting. This has been The Ghost of Grace Brown, the latest episode of Mystery Ghost Stories. Until next time.